translate? Okay. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm very grateful for Earth Company and for Asuka and Tomo for supporting me in my journey. Before I begin my talk, I would like to begin with a poem. My poem is actually one that I wrote 5 years ago, and it's a poem that my family here is probably sick of hearing from the Marshall Islands. This poem is about how, it's a poem that I wrote for the opening of the United Nations Climate Summit in 2014. It's a poem that I wrote about climate change because Marshall Islands is on the front lines of climate change. Marshall Islands is one of the first countries to disappear because of the rising sea level. So the poem is a letter that I wrote to my daughter. Her name is Matafele Benham Kathy Makirusa. And she was 7 months old at the time, and it's my promise to her about how we would continue to fight for climate change. It is in English, however, there are Japanese subtitles on the video, so I encourage many of our audience members who might not be understanding to just read the subtitles. And yeah, I think that's... Oh, and I will explain how it relates to my work with IMPACT HEROES and Earth Company after. So we can start the video. Dear Matafele Benham, you are a 7-month-old sunrise of gummy smiles. You are bald as an egg and bald as a Buddha. You are thighs that are thunder, shrieks that are lightning, so excited for bananas, hugs, and our morning walks along the lagoon. Dear Matafele Benham, I want to tell you about that lagoon. That lucid, sleepy lagoon lounging against the sunrise. Men say that one day that lagoon will devour you. They say we'll gnaw at the shoreline, chew at the roots of your breadfruit trees, gulp down rows of seawalls, and crunch through your island's shattered bones. They say you, your daughter, and your granddaughter too will wander, rootless, with only a passport to call home. Dear Matafele Benham, don't cry. Mommy promises you no one will come and devour you. No greedy whale of a company sharking through political seas. No backwater bullying of businesses with broken morals. No blindfolded bureaucracy. Gonna push this mother ocean over the edge. No one's drowning, baby. No one's moving. No one's losing their homeland. No one's gonna become a climate change refugee. Or should I say no one else? To the Carteret Islanders of Papua New Guinea and to the Taro Islanders of the Solomon Islands, I take this moment to apologize to you. We are drawing the line here. Because we, baby, we're going to fight. Your mommy, daddy, boo-boo, Jimma, your country, and your president too, we will all fight. And even though there are those hidden behind platinum titles who like to pretend that we don't exist, who like to pretend that the Marshall Islands, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Maldives, Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, the floods of Algeria, Colombia, Pakistan, and all the earthquakes and hurricanes and tidal waves didn't exist. Still, there are those who see us, hands reaching out, fists raising up, banners unfurling, megaphones booming, and we are canoes blocking coal ships. We are the radiance of solar villages. We are the fresh, clean soil of the farmer's past. We are petitions blooming from teenage fingertips. We are families biking, recycling, reusing, engineers dreaming, designing, building, artists painting, dancing, writing, and we are spreading the word. And there are thousands out on the street, marching hand in hand, chanting for change now, and they're marching for you, baby. They're marching for us, because we deserve to do more than just survive. We deserve to thrive. Dear Matafele Benham, you are eyes heavy with drowsy weight, so just close those eyes and sleep in peace, because we won't let you down. You'll see. Thank you. So that poem was a poem that I performed back in 2015, and it's the basis of the work that I do, which is that I believe in the use of poetry and media and art to raise awareness on climate change. I began as an individual, as a poet, But through my journey, I began to also realize that it can't just be an individual. It has to be a collective effort. This title of this presentation, Many Drops Together Make Up the Ocean, is a Marshallese proverb which demonstrates this belief that each drop matters and that we all of our contributions matters in the climate movement. So just some background for those who might not know. This is where the Marshall Islands is located. So it's in the northern Pacific region in an area known as Micronesia, and it's a 4-hour flight away from Hawaii, for those who might not know. We are a collection of over 60 coral atolls. We're an atoll nation, and so our geography means that we're only 2 meters above sea level. Our people have been living here on these islands for thousands of years. We went through we survived colonization first by the Germans, and then actually the Japanese also came and occupied the Marshall Islands for some time. So my great-grandfather is actually Japanese, and so the legacies of colonialism live within me as well. After the Japanese occupied the Marshall Islands, the Americans came in, and then we entered into a trust territory relationship. It was during this period that the US began to test nuclear weapons on our islands. The US tested over 60 nuclear weapons on our islands, the largest of which was the Bravo bomb, which is said to be, I think, 10,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima bomb. We have some of the highest rates of cancer in the world, and the islands that they tested nuclear weapons on, we can never go to or return to again because it's too irradiated. When I discuss climate change, I always begin with the nuclear testing history because this is how Marshallese people enter the conversation of climate change. We already know what it is to lose islands because of global influences. So now, this is Majuro where I live, and partially at this time. And this is what it looks like. It's completely flat. There are no mountains. Some parts are so thin you can stand in the middle of the road and feel ocean spray on either side of you. And so we're extremely vulnerable to sea level rise. Many people like to say, well, why don't you just leave? You know, if it's not safe anymore, then just pick up and leave. But our culture is very rooted to the land. There are so many stories, chants, proverbs that are rooted in the land that come from a piece of land. And it's incredibly important to who we are as a people. So we don't want to have to leave. Something to keep in mind is that the Marshall Islands contributes 0.00001% of the world's global emissions, and yet we will be the first one to disappear because of climate change. First off, so the experiences of climate change is we get wave-induced flooding. So every time there's a high tide, there's all these huge waves that come in and crash against our homes. They flood our streets, they destroy our crops, and they even destroy islands, complete islands. So this is a land that 10 years ago was lush. It was full of coconut trees, pandanus trees. That's what the landowner told me. And now it's just a bed of rocks and sand. And that's what's going to happen to the rest of our islands. So for us, climate change is not at all a future phenomenon. It is something that's happening right now. So this is my cousin's house that was destroyed after a particularly bad king tide. And so it just completely flattened a house that she's lived in her whole life. And so she had to spend at least 2 to 3 years, you know, applying for loans, finding land to build a new house. And that's very difficult in a country where, you know, the minimum wage was as much as $2 an hour. And it's very difficult to find land to build houses on in general. So life is already hard in the Marshall Islands as it is, but climate change already makes things harder. And so there's a lot of different social issues that we have in the Marshall Islands that includes many of the issues that have been listed by Bella and some of the other impact heroes, and childbirth, poverty, social issues, lack of support for LGBTQ youth. Climate change just exacerbates those issues. So these are projections of different parts of the island and what's going to happen with 1 foot of sea level rise. This is 1 foot, then 2 feet, and then 3 feet of sea level rise. And this is the road along the airport. This is 1 foot, 2 feet, and 3 feet. So you see that the entire island is already underwater with just 3 feet of sea level rise. So worst case scenario, if there's nothing that's done at all, is that the Marshall Islands will be uninhabitable by as soon as 2030. So now the Marshall Islands is looking at options like these, like, what is the word? artificial. It's like alternative artificial islands. So we're looking at the possibility of either elevating our islands, man-made, construction that would elevate our islands, or building completely new islands, which is an extreme response, and it indicates how serious of an issue it is for the Marshallese people. So my solution is partially to continue to create poetry and art. So this is a screenshot from a video that we're going to show later, and it's a video that I coordinated with 350.org, which is an international organization. This was a video where it connected the rising sea level with the melting ice in Greenland. So I traveled to Greenland to meet with a Greenlandic indigenous poet, and we collaborated to create a new poem that connects our two islands, because Greenland is actually the largest island on Earth. So I believe very passionately in the power of art and media to transcend the issue of climate change, because climate change is very much predicated on science. It's on policy, it's on politics. And for a lot of people, they can't connect to climate change because of that. They can't connect to it because it doesn't connect to their spirit or to their heart. Whereas art has that ability. It goes beyond communication strategies. It connects people and human beings, and also provides us the ability to direct the story when you are the one telling the story. But as I said before, it shouldn't just be an individual. So that's why I founded with my cousins Jotjugum, and this was before I performed at the United Nations. So Jotjugum is a nonprofit that me and my cousins founded a few years ago, and it's all about empowering and involving Marshall Islands youth in environmentalism and climate change issues. So we do it through 3 core programs. We have the Earth Champions program, which teaches youth project management, grant writing, and then they create solutions of their own for their villages. Then there's the Climate Change Arts Camp, where we teach high school students how to use poetry and mural painting to raise awareness on climate change. And then there's the Digital Storytellers, where we teach them how to use media, video, recordings, and then they create videos and interview their neighbors and their family and friends on climate change, and they create videos for social media. So thanks to the support of Earth Company, we finally were able to open our first youth center. So Jotjugum in Marshallese means your place or your home, but we've never had a place or a home. And so this center is our first for our organization. Yes, so this is, again, because of our donors who are in this room, such as Mr. Maruyama-san, and many others. And so we're just really grateful for that. So our belief is that climate change won't be solved by one individual alone. We can't wait for one, savior to come along and to change things the way that they are. We need a systemic change. And for systemic change to happen, we need mass mobilization. We need people to be a part of the movement. And so there are already organizations that are doing the work on the ground, that are getting people involved. But more people need to be a part of those movements. So it's about not sitting back and letting others make that change, but rather involving yourself in that movement in any way possible. And something to remember is that what's happening in the Marshall Islands is tragic. It is, and it's something that we are constantly having to face. But it's also what's going to happen for the rest of the world. Everything that's happening in the Marshall Islands is a microcosm of what will happen to the rest of the world. And that's why Marshall Islands, and especially Marshallese youth, need to be at the forefront of these discussions and need to be one of the people, need to be the leaders of this social movement and this change. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。